Hello, we're going to talk about upsets today, whether they're functional or decorative. Now, I'm going to show you lots of different examples for all sorts of different things, but we're going to start by explaining what upsets are. Basically, upsetting is when you take hot material and you push it back into itself and the hot material gets thicker. That's basically what you need to know about upsetting. There's all sorts of different uses. It can be decorative and it can be functional. And we're going to show you all sorts of different examples. We've got loads of different material here. Round, square, flat bar, thin, thick. Some are going to be decorative, some are going to be really useful, and some are going to be a mixture of both. Okay, so the first thing you need to know is that you're probably going to want to use a coke forge rather than a gas forge. The reason being is that with a coke forge you can get a really intense heat in a very small area, because what you need to do is get a really short bright heat on each of your bits of material. With the gas forge, the transition between really hot and a bit cold is quite long, so you're going to end up with a long heat. Whereas on a coke forge you can get a really screaming hot fire and just use sort of 50 mil, 25 mil, something like that, to get your material really hot. You want to try and get this done without using your quench tank, but the option is always there to quench the back of the heat to make that heat nice and short. But we're going to be using the coke forge. It's a bit noisy, so every time I'm going to talk I'm going to turn it off, which is why it doesn't look as intense as it normally does. The other thing to know is that your material, when you're upsetting, needs to be dead straight. If it's not straight, you're going to be fighting against any of those bends, and it's going to want to kick the upset to one side or another, and you'll be fighting yourself and going around in circles. So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to turn the forge back on, I'm going to get it quite hot, and then we're going to start with the long pole and the square section, and I'm going to show you two different examples of a decorative upset. We're going to do a 3-heat upset. 2 heats to upset and 1 heat just to put a nice decorative chamfer on it. These are used in all sorts of different ways to decorate the ends of bars for all sorts of things like handles for companion sets, or railings or anything like that, features in gates, anything like that. So purely decorative, and you'll see what I'm going to do with them. So this is after 1 heat. I've been turning it every time I've been hitting down on the anvil to try and keep the balance and correct any imperfections that I'm doing when I bring it down. You can see, hopefully, there's a slight curve beginning to form, and you might find that the end isn't necessarily exactly square, and you want to correct that before you put it into the fire for the next heat. The kind of golden rule with upsets is that anything that goes into the fire should be ready to hit as soon as it comes out. So you want to make sure that all of these slight curves are corrected, and anything on the end that needs to be square is square, and I'll show you how I do that right now. So we didn't take much with this one. I've hit into negative space. Basically, if I lift my hand up slightly, I create negative space under here for me to hit down with a hammer and take that bend out. Once I think it's straight, I can then hit on the flat end of the upset to just make the end more square to the bar. So now it's ready to go back into the fire and get ready for the next upset. So this is after 2 upsets. You can see the thickness of the material is quite pronounced compared to the rest of the bar here. There's still a bit of correction from that second heat, so I'm going to correct that, but I'm happy with how much upset that's had. It's a nice kind of visual. This could be a curtain pole, and you want to make it subtle but also sort of obvious in a funny way. What I'm going to show you now, after I've corrected it, it'll go back in the fire, and what I can do is I can put a chamfer on this corner, and what that will do is it will make a nice detail, a nice feature of the fact that it's an upset. It's a very classic thing to do as a blacksmith after you've upset something, and it'll just create a feature of the fact that it's an upset. It'll look really nice, it'll catch the light in lots of different ways, and it's a really nice way of finishing off this process. When you're doing this, particularly with long material, it's always useful to use a stand. The stand being ever so slightly higher than the anvil, because what that does is it allows you to, for one, rest your hands, but also work the material without causing too much of an issue with the anvil leaving marks if you're wanting to hit it. So I'm happy with that upset now. I'm going to get it back in the fire and put a chamfer on the end, and you'll see that. So there we go. You've got a simple 2-heat upset, the 3rd heat to put the chamfer on. If you're consistent with your hammer, with your angle and your pressure, and you just keep rotating as you're hitting, that chamfer is going to be nice and even. You can see a nice amount of sort of fluting to the edge of this. Makes a nice sort of feature for the end of a curtain pole, for example. The same principle applies to if you use square bar. Exactly the same size. This is 20mm and 20mm. I've taken the corners off here cold. but I've done exactly the same. This is a 3 heat upset as well. So 2 heats for the upset and 1 heat for the chamfer. With this one, I've just put a chamfer on each side and then a tiny one on each of the flat spots on the corners. And this will be the top of companion set. So not only is it a nice feature, it's a useful place to hold if you want to move that companion set around. But the same principle. So this is a very decorative upset. Decorative in the sense that it doesn't hugely serve a function, but nevertheless, it looks good. It's a nice way of finishing off a bar, and you get a nice result. So those are decorative upsets on square and round bar. With this one, it's a flat bar. It's 20 by 8 mil. And what I want to do, this is going to be a shelf bracket. So what I want to do is put an upset on both ends, but I want it to be an offset upset. I want the back to remain flat, and I want all of that fluting to come from the front, so that the face of that upset is going to be at a slight angle. Now it's almost exactly the same principle. There's a bit more controlling to do once you've upset it on the anvil. But if you know the basics of how to control how that bend gets put in, then you can control where your upset goes and how your upset looks. So this is kind of a deviation, because with the first two, I wanted to make sure that I had to correct it as little as possible. Whereas this one, I'm going to have to do a bit more forcing to make sure that it bends in the right way, in the right direction that I want it to. So it's a very slight change, but you'll see it get heated up, similar short heat, and then upset. I'm going to use this anvil because of the height. I'm going to be hitting it with the hammer instead of using its own weight. And I'm going to show you how to just put a slight bend on it for the next heat. So after the first upset, because of the thickness of this material, you can see that natural bend that's come in. Normally that's a problem with upsetting, but because we want an offset upset, this is going to be used to our advantage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to correct this, again hitting over negative space to get a flat back, or the start of a flat back. You'll also notice that it's got a bit wider, so I'm going to correct that as well. So this is ready to go back in the fire. What you notice is that the back is flat or thereabouts. There's a start of a curve coming here, and this face here is not square to the bar. Now normally that would be a problem, but because we want this offset, that's again going to work to our advantage. When I come in and bring it out the second time, I'm going to upset it in exactly the same way, and what it's naturally going to want to do is kick over that way, because the flat of the anvil is going to want to make that not flat end bend, if that makes any sense. And whilst I'll continue to correct that during the heat, what that's going to do is accentuate this offset, this end that's not quite square. And then I'll bring it back down to parent thickness on the width, and I can show you what to do to accentuate that. So that's 2 heats now. What you can see, I've knocked it back down to parent thickness. This upset has got much more pronounced, and that angle is very much defined now. I corrected it a few times, I had to, because this just wants to bend all the time. And that's fine because I want it offset, but it means a lot more correction. Now I can bring it out for the 3rd heat, and I can really make a point of this being offset by coming with my hammer in this direction to accentuate that. But what that's going to do is it's going to curve the back more, and it's going to put more of a curve in this front face. So I'm then going to have to define that and control that using the bick on the anvil and the shape of that to just refine that front curve. And then you'll see me just take the corners off, because ultimately someone's going to want to touch this, especially when they're putting it up. And it's a good practice to not have any very hard edges. So now I'm going to control that front curve by bringing it over to use the curve of the bick. Just to define that curve. And again, bring it down to parent thickness. Now at this point I can flatten the back just by creating that negative space again. So what you've got now is a nice smooth curve, an offset front and a flat back. And now that all that's left at this sort of planishing heat, slightly less than a cherry red, I can just very gently put small chamfers on each of these prominent edges. And then just 1 and 2 on the corners. And after a quick brush, you'll see a nice defined upset, a nice flat back, a nice defined curve to accentuate that upset, and a nice angle on the front. So that's one upset, that's one side of a, if you like, a two-ended shelf bracket. I want to do the same thing on the other end. And if you notice, the first upset that I did for this one, it bent in one way and I was able to just go with whichever way it bent. But with this one, I want the bend, I want that curve and that offset to be on the same face. I want this one to bend this way in order to get that to match, so that when this is bent into a right angle, the flat backs are on the same side. So how do I do that? How do I make sure that when this inevitably bends with the upsetting, it bends in the right direction? Now the trick is quite counterintuitive, because actually what you think, because of this bending that way, you're going to want to bring it this way slightly. But actually it's the other way. If you get this cool, hang on, let me get this cool. Don't quench, guys. So here, it's on this plane. This is the flat back, and I want to put an upset in. If I want to put an upset in to match this one, I have to start by bending this back slightly. And what that's going to do is it's going to put a bend in here that's going to allow that to match that side. Once that bend's put in, I can correct it all I like, I can upset it all I like, but just for those few first hits, bending it backwards is going to make sure that the bend is in the right plane, and you'll see what I mean. So I'm coming in with the back this side, so I'm going to lean towards the back for the first few hits. What that's going to do is it's going to put that bend in quite dramatically. Once that's done, I can actually just correct it. Bring it down to parent thickness again. And what you notice is, immediately, that angle's been created. Still got a flat back, but if you look at that angle and notice that it's on the same plane as that angle. So I can now do the rest of this side as I had done with the previous side, knowing that that angle's already set and I can just get an upset on it as I did the first time. So that's the second heat ups of the upset. As you can see, like the first, that angle's been very clearly defined. So in the last heat, the third heat, I'm gonna come in on the end of this upset like I did before. That's again gonna accentuate that curve, gonna accentuate that angle, but it's gonna put a slight bend in the back. So I'll use the bick again to just redefine that curve there. And then I'll show you that it's both on the same angle. On the same side, I mean. Okay, so two upsets then, flat backs, nice curve, nice detail for the end of a shelf bracket. What you'll notice is that they're both on the same plane like we've talked about, but there's going to be marks on the end of the first upset here where I've had to hit it in order to get the upset on the other end. Now there's a big debate in blacksmithing as to whether or not I should leave that as part of its story, as a part of its life. I quite like that idea. If you didn't want this mark, what you could do is you could upset the other end before you did the last heat, because on the last heat you don't need to hit from the other end with the hammer, and that way you can dress this up towards the end. But I'm not too bothered about that, because what I quite like is the story of the life of it. It shows that it's been made by hand. It shows a bit of the story as to how it's been made. So that's how to control offset upsets. Again, decorative, but you can play around with this. Obviously the stock size is important. It works really nicely on flat bar. You need a bit of thickness in the material. So that's decorative upsets. We've shown you a few examples for on the round and the square for a curtain pole and a companion set stand. We've also shown you the offset upsets that I use for these shelf brackets, and how you can control the bends that inherently and inevitably happen on flat bar. We're going to split this video in two because it's become a little bit longer than it expected. Next video we're going to talk about how upsets can be used for a practical sense. If you just need to add more material to a certain section, we're going to be showing you that in making scarves, when you're using scarves for fire welding, or forge welding, but also we're going to be doing some pokers with diamond points on. I'll show you how adding material to the end of those makes your life easier. It gives you a whole vast array of options. So make sure you check that video out, but thanks for watching.